run out of bullets.
How you're doing that?
Run out of bullets.
There's plenty more where those came from, kid.
I think I'm going to hit myself in the left ear.
Well, look carefully. You come down here, you start this way, you have to start, and then you come right down around behind you, and then come around here and around your head, and then you got it, see? You come around this way, down here, and then up, and then down, straight down. And you have to keep this going pretty well straight down when you let go of the string, see? And you put your hand, you really put your weight into it, and
I'm going to
I
get you
used
to
to be
teach
able
me
to
how to
throw
do
them
that.
almost across the river here that far, but I kind of lost a little bit of my zip for some reason. And I shoot more accurate now than I ever could before. I've been practicing on that accuracy system, and that I used a shorter string, and that way I'm able to get more accuracy.
Accuracy counts more than distance.
Well, yeah, it does really, in the end.
That's great.
But
You got any more to throw?
well, I'll have to get some more bullets if I throw any more. So that's about all I can do right now. But anyway, that's the system on it.
Yeah, it's a good system. It's a real system.
Well, you see, if you try to do it any other way, you can't tell when you're going to let go of the string so well. And this way, at least, when you come straight down, you only have two places to guess where you're going to let go of that one. If you bring it around like this, you never know where it might go up. You know, harder to guess where you're going to let go of the string.
How old were you, kid, when you made your first one?
Oh, I started this when I was just a kid, 10 years old or so.
So we're here, and this is the River Runners Oral History Project, and we're here with Kent Frost, and it's September 17th, 1994. We're at National Canyon in the Grand Canyon, and this is me, Lew, and there's Jeff over there running the camera. What I've been asking everybody to do is just, for starters, just tell a little bit about your background and kind of where you were born and raised and stuff, and how you first got into, how you got started running rivers, how you got started doing that.
Well, actually I was born in Snowflake, Arizona, and then at that time my father had lived in southeastern Utah for 3 or 4 years, and he was just a young man then. And so it happened that my mother was in the Snowflake, Arizona, where they came from, and that's where they were raised, and that was where I was born. And then at that, my folks always lived though in Monticello, and that was always my home. And my dad took up a homestead 10 miles south of Monticello, 320 acres of land, and so then that's where I grew up mostly. And it was a interesting life being raised on a farm like that. And this dryland farming is not very productive because we only get about 12 inches of rainfall a year. And so when you raise wheat, why they call it the summer fallow method, and you plant the wheat in the fall and then harvest it the next spring. And then after the next summer, and then after the wheat is harvested late in the summer, why then they prepare the land then and get ready for the crop the following year. However, when we would raise pinto beans, we raised a crop every year with them. And we had lots of pinto beans to eat, along with deer meat once in a while, and rabbits and sage chickens that were plentiful in that part of the country at that time.
What's a sage chicken?
As which?
What's a sage chicken?
Oh, they are a grouse type of a bird that lives in the sagebrush country, and their meat has a flavor of sage, and I think that's the reason they are called sage chickens.
Are you comfortable? I'm not crowding you. Don't let me crowd you with this mic.
Oh no, that don't
You
bother
just
me.
get comfortable, and I'll move it around to.
Yeah, just anything.
Okay, well, just don't let me. Did you have a bunch of brothers and sisters and stuff?
Yes, I had a sister and a brother older, and a sister and a brother younger than I am. And my older brother, he ended up owning a lot of that dry farm land around Monticello, and he went into that farming business in a big way. And anyway, I had a farm also, and the odd thing about that farm, I could think of lots of places I'd rather be than out there sitting on a tractor that'd take a week just to plow one of our big fields so you could plant wheat on it. And I could think of other places I'd a lot rather be in. So anyway, along in about 1935, I got acquainted with Norman Nevills. He lived at Mexican Hat, Utah, and he was just getting into river traveling then and experimenting on the San Juan River with boats. And so I was always interested in that anyway, especially, and I made my own small wooden boat before then and tried that around on the local reservoirs around our area. And so I started going down and visiting him in the winter time when everything was snowed in up in the higher country at Monticello. And so I'd go down to Mexican Hat where it's generally warmer and no snow, and I'd help him with all the different projects. And one winter I helped him about a week drilling a water well out behind the lodge. And it was an interesting drill rig he had, because that was a leftover from the early 1900s oil exploration in the area. They did find a limited amount of oil, and they get down around 400 feet and run into these little pockets of oil, and some of it was productive for a while. And the old rig would run real good, and it was powered by a steam engine and a steam boiler. And I would put wood into the steam boiler and fire it up and get it hot and keep it at a constant 60 pounds of steam pressure, so it run the steam engine.
So, and you were drilling for water. You must have about had to go as deep for water as you did for oil, huh? Or was it pretty close?
Well, yes, and that was the odd thing about it. He finally ended up hitting oil down in the bottom of that where he was supposed to hit water. So he gave up the project. And then also at that time, I'd go down in the summer in August when there were not much of anything going on, and help him around. We made 2 different boats then. They were the San Juan type. And also while I was there, he had a large water tank mounted on the bed of an old GMC truck. And I would drive down to the river where we had a small gasoline engine hooked onto a water pump out of the river. I'd pump up the tank with water, then I'd drive up there and dump it into the big storage tank. And it'd take about 4 days of work to fill up the water tank then, and it would last for a month with the river water. And that was the only source of water they were using down in that part of the country at the time.
Was that just the Nevills, or was that the whole town?
Well, that was everybody that lived in the area around there, like Nevills and other people that were in, some miners trying to get gold out of the San Juan River too at that time.
gosh.
And that was just right kind of at the end of the Depression. And so I grew up with the learning how to make anything I needed to use, like tools and different things. And we didn't have the money to buy it with. And so in connection with running the dry farm, we had a blacksmith forge equipment there, and I learned how to make things in the blacksmith forge. And so just about anything I had to kind of create it myself.
I gotta adjust this little rascal here. Excuse me. When we were on the boat there that day with Martin below the Little Colorado, you told me about setting out hiking, how you'd go with just a pistol and a little cornmeal, and what else was it you had? And could you just tell a little bit about that? How you got started doing that, and how you do it and what you take with you.
Well, yes. Somehow I never did get along very good with horses. I've ridden them a lot and things like that, but they're not dependable, and it's hard to go out in the pasture and catch one if I wanted to go 10 miles to town. And so the time I'd fool around trying to get a horse saddled up, and on my way, I could go cross country and be in Monticello then after about 6 miles of hiking, and that would be crossing a big canyon where I could take a dip in the creek during the summertime and cool off. And so I did, and always enjoy hiking. And then I used to go hiking up in the mountain a lot. And then I wanted to explore more country, so I didn't have any equipment. And so I learned how to sleep by a campfire, and I used tin cans to cook in, and they would nestle together, and they didn't weigh very much. And so I'd just go out hiking across country. In the summertime, I could go up in the mountains. And in the colder weather, then I'd get down in the lower canyons, which would be around 4,000 or 5,000 feet elevation. And it was easy to develop that system because all you can do is just burn wood. And I learned to drag in a big log when I got ready to make my fire in colder weather. I like a pinyon tree or something. And then start my fire in the center of the log, and then when it burned in two, then you run the ends together, and they keep burning good night, all night long that way. And then it would not take very much small wood to keep it going. And another good system, when the weather got real cold, I did carry a small piece of canvas about 6 by 6 feet, and I'd lay that down on the ground and pull it around in front of me. And also I'd get these large stones, they weigh probably 15 pounds or something, and have them sitting around the edge of the fire so they get real warm. And then when I get up to put on more wood on the fire, I'd put one of them stones on my stomach and hold it with my gloves and have my fanny and my feet kind of up to the fire, and that'd keep my real warm then. That was a good system I had. And the best way is to get where there's a sort of a sloping overhang or in a cave or something, and then you have your fire out on one side and you lay back in there kind of in the overhang, and the heat reflects down onto your body also from the rock, and that helps when you can find that kind of a setup. And so anyway, I started going out on extended trips, and I explored that Needles country, later made into Canyonland National Park on foot, and several of the big canyons around there. And I hiked from Landing on westward and over to Comb Wash, and that was one of my first extended trips. I walked all the way down Comb Wash then, about 15 miles to the San Juan River, and then back up over the cross country to Bluff. and things like that.
When you say an extended trip, about how many days would, on the average, would something like that be, and maybe how many miles overall, just roughing it out?
Well, I used to be a lot more ambitious, and I could hike a lot of miles, so I'd probably cover 15 miles in a day and be gone for 3 or 4 days on them kind of trips.
And so you talk about sleeping by the fire. Did you have any kind of sleeping bag or blanket or any of that?
Well, no, I was always kind of cold-blooded, and so I knew I couldn't carry enough blankets to keep me warm, and so that's why I developed the system of sleeping by a fire.
Well, when you'd go, what would you be carrying then? Just exactly what would you take with you?
Oh, a little bag of sugar and maybe about 2 pounds of cornmeal and 2 or 3 packages of raisins, and that'd be my main food. And then I could knock off a rabbit once in a while with my pistol, and a rabbit or squirrel, and then I'd eat them also. And I could either boil up the cornmeal in my can and eat that with raisins in it, or if I didn't have a fire going, I could just eat dry cornmeal with raisins. And I generally have some roasted meat that I could carry. I'd take with me the leftover from the day before. And then a lot of times I'd have jerky. I see we would kill our own beef or else deer and then make jerky out of it. And that was the ideal food to have as jerky, and then that went along good with the cornmeal or else oatmeal. I did carry oatmeal sometimes also.
On the farm, when you said earlier that you make your own stuff, what kind? Do you mean your own tools and stuff like that? What kinds of things would you make that nowadays somebody would just go buy?
Well, I made a few knives, and with the blacksmith forge, you'd use that to heat iron to repair different items. And then also when you, with the plowshares that were attached to the plow, you'd have to sharpen them about every 3 days, and that was quite a big project in the forge. And then it was a few later, after I was doing kind of woodwork and crafts and things like that, when I needed special tools, I was able to make them, such as special screwdrivers or a part that had to be a special angle to fit in what I was making, and wood chisels and them kind of simple tools.
I missed the first end of that story you were telling there the other night up there below Deer Creek. But was that your first river trip, that little walkabout you talked about with your buddy there, where you guys ended up going down into Glen Canyon and
Well, no. Did you want that whole story on this tape?
No, we better not. Just
I
because
could make it look kind of a short sketch of it, possibly.
Well, that might be good.
Well, with Nevills then, I helped him work on boats and things like that, and he's always going to take me on a river trip, he says. And so in 1937, I helped him make a special San Juan boat, and he used Sitka spruce lumber that shipped in from Oregon to make that one with, and we put that together. And then it was in 38, after he had made his famous run down through Cataract Canyon and through the Grand Canyon, and being the first one to introduce women into river traveling, which was unheard of in them days, because nobody's supposed to be on the river except great, big, burly, strong men, and they're real brave, And so taking women on the trip was unheard of, and so he got a lot of national publicity and all that stuff, and it was on the radio and the newspapers, and everything had a lot of coverage on it. And so this Elzada Clover, who had come down through the Grand Canyon and made the first part of the run with him, she wanted to go down the San Juan River in September. And so I went along on that trip as a boatman. And so I did the San Juan River trip that year and all down through Glen Canyon and came out at Lee's Ferry on that. So I did have a little bit of a river experience. And so then the next year in 39, I wanted to go on a river trip and didn't have a chance to, so I just dreamed up my own trip. And I asked my cousin if he wanted to go with me on a hiking trip around, and he says, yeah, he didn't know what he's getting into or anything, but he says he'd go along with me. And so anyway, we started out with a small backpack that had carrying straps over your shoulders, and we started out from the top of Blue Mountain. That's about 10 miles west of Monticello. They had a scout party up there on top of the mountain, so we told them we was going hiking from the scout party, and we didn't know how long we'd be gone. We told some of the kids that, and so we took off then westward and went all the way down across North Elk Mountain and down South Elk Mountain past the Bears Ears and down to Natural Bridges National Monument. And I think it took us 3 or 4 days getting that far. And then when we got to Natural Bridges, we asked the lady if she had any food that we could have, because we were going to hike on down along White Canyon over to the Colorado River. And so she gave us a little bag of rice and some sugar. And so we were glad to get that. And the first day after we left the Natural Bridges, we hiked right down the bottom of White Canyon. And that brought us out by the Soldiers Crossing, they call it. And then from there on, we continued down the old trail that went along on the bench above White Canyon, and it took us one big, long, full day to walk from there to Height. And that was a hot day in August, and we got real thirsty on that before we finally got down to where the crossing is on White Canyon again. And then we found pothole water there, and we were glad we could find that one. And we continued on down into the Colorado River, and I made a small raft and paddled across the river to Height. And we talked to this Art Chaffin then, and he kept asking us how we was going to get down to Lee's Ferry and everything. Oh, we had a raft. We was going to float down on the raft, and he says, "Hey, I think you boys better not try that. But if you'll stay here and work for me for a week on my ranch, I'll make you a boat that'll take you right on down to Lee's Ferry, and you'll be a lot safer if you have a little boat to go down in." And so we decided to do that one. And we liked his ranch anyway because he had all kinds of fruit trees there that were getting ripe. That included several fig trees and a big watermelon patch, and that was real good food. We enjoyed that while we stayed over the day with him. And so we stayed there, and he put us out hoeing these weeds out. They had the real tough kind that grow on the irrigated land, you know, and I'd never didn't know how to hoe them kind of weeds, but my cousin, he was raised down near Holbrook, Arizona, and he knew all about them kind of weeds, so he tore into them and hoeing real good. But Art Chaffin could see that I didn't do very well on the weeds, and he says, "Hey, I've got an old Dodge truck, car across the river. They'll move over here." And so we loaded that on 3 rowboats, and he had 2 big planks he put across them crossways, and an outboard motor on the middle boat. But we put that car up on them planks on them 3 rowboats, and he started up and ferried that right on across the Colorado River over to the Height. And then he had a team of horses waiting there, and he hooked onto that and pulled it off from the boat's end and up into his garage. And so we tore that all down, and so you get it cleaned up. The river had been up over it part way, and it had to have sand cleaned out. And so anyway, he did build us a little boat, and so we started down the river. And he gave us a dozen guinea hen eggs and a whole bunch of watermelons that we started out with, and some peaches and stuff. After a few days that was all gone, and we did have about a pound of cracked wheat cereal and a half a can of the chocolate. And then after that was all gone, and so we didn't have anything to eat. And I had this .38 special pistol I could shoot real good with, and so we was floating along, and here was a beaver swimming out there a little ways, and they just have their ear above the water, you know, when they're swimming out there. And I took a shot of that beaver and missed it. And so he dived down in the river, and I thought, oh, that's our last chance. But in a little while he came up, and he's still out there about 25 yards. And I took another shot, and I got him right in the ear. And so I rode over there with the boat real fast, and the water was almost clear because the river was extremely low that year. And so there's a lot of blood around in the river, and I jumped in and was able to catch that beaver between my feet, and I reached down and pulled him up into the boat. And so we skinned out the hindquarters and the backbone of it, and then we pulled into shore and going to have a beaver feast. And we put it on to boil in the cans, and it boiled for a while, and we tried to eat it. We boiled it some more, and we tried to eat it. It's too tough, and it just tasted terrible. And also we had some roasting on the coals, and that was even worse. And I don't know what was wrong with that beaver, but we couldn't eat it. And so anyway, we got our fish lines out and put that beaver meat on the fish hooks, and the catfish liked it. So we were pulling the catfish out real fast with our fish lines, and so we'd take the insides out of them and lay them on the hot coals and roast the catfish. So we'd eaten catfish there for a couple hours, and by that time it was getting dark. But anyway, on this trip, you see, we were just sleeping by the campfire.
No bedrolls, no blankets.
Our whole pack only weighed probably 15 pounds when we started out anyway. And we just eating on rabbits and squirrels that I could shoot on the way with my pistol. And we were getting along all right after we had learned how to catch catfish. Before we didn't have the right kind of bait, and we only caught just a few of them. And then we got along real well, and we got down to the San Juan River, and it would plumb dry all the way across the bottom of the San Juan River. We wanted a bit of water, and we walked up it a long ways on the real dry sand. And so that was unusual, you know. And we got down to Rainbow Bridge, and here was a lady sitting on the beach, and so we talked to her, and she had come down with the mule pack train from the Rainbow Lodge with a party. And anyway, we hiked up to Rainbow Bridge and then back down so we could see Rainbow Bridge, and continued on down the Colorado River. And when we come to Navajo Canyon, there was a great flood of red water coming out of that. It finally got some rain up in there someplace, and there's a big flood out of it. And right after that, there's a lot of sand waves coming down the Glen Canyon through there for several miles. And then we didn't want to drink the red water, and there's a spring coming out of the side of the canyon, so we pulled in there and filled up our can full of spring water, and that lasted us until we got to Lee's Ferry. And then it took us, as soon as we got to Lee's Ferry, we walked up to the Marble Canyon Lodge and got bought a loaf of bread and a bottle of jam, and went out behind the store and ate that up real fast. And we walked from there on up to Badger Creek Trading Post and stayed there. The man let us sleep in his hogan, and he gave us 2 quilts to sleep in. That was pretty good for us. You see, we'd been wearing the same clothes all the way down through there, and just swimming in the river with them, and sleeping by the campfire, and we'd be rolling around in the ashes and charcoal and stuff like that at night when it get cold. And so I guess we didn't look very good, and we nobody would pick us up very well. So it took us 5 days to hitchhike up around through back to Monticello. And one thing that happened before we left Height was Art Chaffin, he says, "Say, does your folks know where you boys are at?" And I says, "Oh, I don't know, I doubt it." And he said, "Well, you sit right down here and you write a postcard." I said, "I'm going out to Hanksville tomorrow and I'll mail it for you." And so I wrote them a card. And at least when they got that, they knew where we'd been. And anyway, we finally got back to Monticello, and folks were real glad to see us. And so anyway, we just went right to work back on the farm like nothing had happened, and everybody seemed to be happy about the whole operation.
That's great. Now, you said there was a point in there where your cousin decided to hitchhike and you decided to walk, and you guys got back there about the same time. Was that?
Well, that was on another trip. My brother Alf and I had one year. This was after the war, right after the war. We wanted to go over to Height, and this was along in March. And so we started at Blanding, where that Highway 95 starts, and that was the main horse trail going out westward then. And so we followed that out, and sleeping by a campfire on our way, and we got all the way over to Height then. And this Art Chaffin had a paddle wheel boat that he had made to go up and down the Colorado River with, and he got down stream to Red Canyon to check on a lot of his gold placer mine claims. And then the drive shaft broke from the car engine back to the differential that run the paddle wheels were attached to. So he had to walk back up from Red Canyon up to Height then to get another drive shaft. And so he had to go back down there the next day to get that paddle wheel boat, and wondered if we wanted to go along, and sure, we wanted to go down there. So we floated down in a boat then to his power boat, and he got that all fixed up, and we stayed there overnight. And he suggested that we hike up Tickaboo Canyon up over the little Rocky Mountain, they called it. That's the southern part of the Henry Mountains, and go up over there and stay overnight up in that country someplace, and then come down into 4 Mile Canyon and on up to Height again. So we were ambitious. We said, yeah, we'd like to do that, but we got up on top of the mountain, and the wind had started blowing that day, and it's so strong across the mountain that we there's a lot of boulders and things there, but we walked along the top of it for a little ways, but we couldn't walk on top because the wind was too strong, and we walked on the leeward side of the rocks, and then come back down then and started down toward Height. And we was trying to find a place where we could camp out of the wind, and there was no place at all, and we couldn't find any caves to get in. And so we kept walking, and just as it was getting dark then, we were right at the Colorado River, and we just happened to find a place, come to a place that we could hike right down over the Wingate Ledge then, and that put us down to the Colorado River level, and that was at 4 Mile. And we hiked up there and got in about 2 hours after dark. And he was real surprised to see us, that we made that whole trip in one day when we should have taken 2 days for it, I guess. And anyway, that's the one that my brother, he didn't want to walk back to where we came from. And so he had to ride up to Hanksville with Art Chaffin going up that way the next day. But before they left, they put me across the river, and I hiked back to Monticello the way I came. And I got back to Monticello then the same time he did. You see, I caught a ride from there right on back to Monticello. And so I was there about 10 minutes, and then he come in the door. And so we made it nearly the same time.
So did you finally? So then you finally started. Well, did you work for Norman Nevills for very long? You did a bunch of San Juan trips for him and stuff. Did you come down here with Nevills?
Yes, I worked with Norm off and on for 12 years as a boatman, and I was also the kind of repairman for his equipment. And sometimes when they'd be doing a San Juan trip, I'd stay there and repair boat trailers and work on manufacturing boats and things like that. But I'd rather be on the river doing river trips than I would doing mechanical work. And anyway, I made my first trip to the Grand Canyon with him in 1947. And that was the first time I've been on real big Colorado River waters, you know. But I seemed to adapt to it pretty well, and I got along all right, I thought, as being a boatman all down through here. And it seemed like he had the theory to kind of put a lot of fear in the boatmen so they would be real careful on the river and not try doing anything brave or foolish. And so that was a attitude that I had all the time as a boatman then, to be real careful. And I could always realize that I could row a whole lot faster when I was out there in the river on them big waves, and I could row a whole lot faster then than I could if I was scared and excited and so on. So I guess I was getting the real thrill out of it also, to be able to go down the rough water.
Well, you don't sound like you were all that scared of it even then.
Oh, I believe I was. But no, I enjoyed the trips, and so I went on all of them, and I could get a chance to do with him.
Did you get along? Did you get along with him pretty good?
Yes, I did. I got along with him real well. And then, I guess the year before we come down through the Grand Canyon, we had went up and run all the way down through the Salmon River and come out at Lewiston, Idaho. And then we took the boats back up and put them in the Hell's Canyon and run all the way through Hell's Canyon from Brownlee's Ferry back down to Lewiston.
You and Nevills?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then we also run the Upper Green River. I guess that was in 48 or sometime.
Did you always, those were commercial trips? You had paying customers and all that
Yes,
kind of stuff?
I was always with the commercial trips.